I still see his face in my nightmares, the way his eyes darted left and right, the way his jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth would shatter. It was 5:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, the exact moment my alarm was set to go off for my early shift. Instead of the digital beep, I heard a frantic, persistent pounding on my front door. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing the nearest heavy object, a decorative brass book, and peered through the peephole. It was Mark, my neighbor from across the hall, a quiet man I'd maybe exchanged 10 words with in the 3 years I'd lived in this apartment complex. But this wasn't the quiet, reserved Mark I knew. His face was pale, slick with sweat, and etched with pure, unadulterated terror. The second I unlatched the door, he didn't even wait for me to speak. He pushed the door open just enough, looked me dead in the eye, and whispered not spoke, but a raw, terrified whisper that still echoes in my ears. "Don't go to work today. Just trust me. Don't go in." He didn't explain. He didn't offer a reason. When I finally found my voice and asked, "Mark, what in the world are you talking about? I have a major deadline today." He just shook his head, looking utterly helpless, and gave me the chilling line that defined the next 6 hours of my life. "You'll understand by noon." Then he turned, sprinted down the hallway like a hunted animal, and slammed his own door shut. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, book and still in hand, staring at the closed door, completely paralyzed by a combination of fear and utter bewilderment. He gave me a direct order, a terrifying prophecy, and then vanished. Was I crazy to even consider listening to a man who looked like he'd seen a ghost, a man I barely knew, and risk my job over it? Tell me honestly, if a terrified stranger gave you an instruction that could derail your entire day and refused to give you a single reason why, would you have trusted him? The smell of stale coffee and fear hung in the air long after he was gone. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment like a caged tiger. My job at Sterling and Associates, a massive accounting firm downtown, was more than just a job. It was my life raft. I was an ambitious junior associate, and this was the week I was supposed to be running point on the highly sensitive Henderson merger audit. If I missed today, especially without notice, it wouldn't just be a write-up. It would be a career-ending move. Every logical cell in my brain screamed at me to shower, dress, and leave. Go to work. Mark is clearly having a breakdown. Call the police on him, not your boss. Yet the sheer intensity of his fear was a physical thing, a cold hand gripping my chest that wouldn't let go. I kept replaying the image of his eyes, wide, wet, desperate. It wasn't the look of a lunatic. It was the look of a person trying to save someone from an unseen threat. I finally went to my window, which overlooks the main street, and watched the usual morning rush. Cars honking, people jogging, the city waking up. Everything seemed perfectly, maddeningly normal. I looked across the complex courtyard at the parking garage, where my little blue sedan was parked. It felt like a mile away. I felt utterly alone, suspended between my professional obligations and a completely irrational, yet overwhelming, sense of impending doom. I called my work number, ready to leave a cryptic message, but my supervisor, Mr. Dalton, picked up directly. "Yes, Samantha," he barked, already sounding stressed. I opened my mouth, ready to spin some lie about food poisoning or a flat tire, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie, and I certainly couldn't tell him. My neighbor, who thinks I'm going to die, told me not to come in. I mumbled something about needing 5 extra minutes, hung up, and immediately regretted it. I checked my phone. It was 6:30 a.m. noon. I had 5 hours to understand. I tried to call Mark. No answer. I knocked on his door again. Silence. It was almost as if the man, and the warning he delivered, had been a figment of my imagination, a bizarre, sleep-deprived hallucination. But the fear remained. To distract myself, I did what anyone does in a crisis. I started cleaning. I scrubbed my kitchen counter until it gleamed, organized my bookshelf, and even polished the brass book. And the one I'd been ready to use as a weapon. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer blow. 7:00 a.m. I should be getting into my car now. 7:30 a.m. I should be walking through the grand marble lobby of Sterling and Associates. I pictured my desk perfectly neat, my computer screen still black. I wondered if Mr. Dalton had already noticed my absence. The feeling of guilt, of being a coward for not facing my responsibilities, was almost unbearable. I pulled out my laptop and tried to work remotely, but my concentration was shot. My hands shook as I typed. I kept refreshing the local news websites, expecting a headline to pop up. Major incident at downtown accounting firm. Nothing, just traffic reports and weather forecasts. I even Googled Mark last name and the apartment complex name, hoping for some explanation past arrests, a history of mental health issues, anything that could justify dismissing his warning. All I found was a LinkedIn profile for an IT specialist at a different company across town. He seemed utterly normal. At 9:00 a.m., the silence in my apartment was deafening. I felt like I was losing my mind. I was a rational, data-driven person, and I had just thrown a critical workday down the drain based on a hunch and a neighbor's terrified face. I almost convinced myself to drive in, to at least salvage the last half of the day, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a moment I froze. My first thought was my boss calling to fire me, but then the tiny, irrational voice of fear whispered noon. I swallowed hard and answered, "Hello." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, and undeniably official. "Is this Samantha Miller?" "Yes, this is she. This is Detective Ramirez with the Metropolitan Police Department. I'm calling in reference to an incident at Sterling and Associates." My breath hitched, my entire body went cold, the world tilted on its axis. Incident. I could only manage a shaky what? What kind of incident? The detective's words, as he calmly explained the situation, painted a horrifying scene that my mind could barely process. He explained that a serious security breach and hostage situation had unfolded at the Sterling and Associates building starting around 8:15 a.m. It was not a random act, it was targeted. A disgruntled former client, one whose entire business had been exposed in the Henderson merger audit, the very audit I was leading, had entered the building with 2 armed accomplices. They had gone straight to the 27th floor, my floor, and specifically targeted the employees involved in the merger project. "Your entire team, MS Miller," Detective Ramirez said, his voice dropping slightly, "is currently being held in the main conference room. We are negotiating." I sank onto my sofa, the phone nearly slipping from my grasp. I was supposed to be in that conference room. That's where we held our 8:30 a.m. daily audits in Cup. I was supposed to be there. My absence, the unexplained, illogical choice to stay home, wasn't just a professional blunder. It was the only reason I was sitting in my living room, breathing, and not trapped on the 27th floor. Mark's warning wasn't a delusion. It was a prophecy, and the clock was still ticking toward noon. The next hour was a blur of frantic phone calls with the police. They wanted to know about the office layout, key card access, and most crucially, the details of the Henderson merger that could have provoked such a violent reaction. I was feeding them information, details about the client's finances and their volatile personality that I'd learned during the audit, all the while watching the digital clock on my cable box. 10:45 a.m., 10:55 a.m. Every minute felt like an hour. My terror was now layered with a searing, agonizing guilt. My colleagues, my friends, Mr. Dalton, Sarah, and David were trapped, and I was safe at home because of a completely random, unearned piece of foreknowledge. I told Detective Ramirez about my neighbor's warning, about the 5 a.m. knock, but he dismissed it instantly. "Ma'am, we need facts, not neighborhood gossip." He wasn't wrong, but I knew the two were inextricably linked. Then, at 11:17 a.m., the news broke on every channel. A frantic banner flashed across the bottom of the screen: "Shootout at downtown tower." The police had clearly breached the floor. I watched, transfixed and horrified, as the images flashed. SWAT teams on the street, ambulances arriving, and the steady stream of people evacuating the lower floors. The screen showed a grainy helicopter shot of the 27th floor windows. I could almost make out the conference room. I sobbed, tears blurring my vision, for my friends, for the sheer senselessness of it all. I had to know why Mark knew. Was he involved? Was he the one who set it up and then got cold feet? No, that face of pure fear I saw at 5 a.m. was not the face of a perpetrator. It was the face of a witness, a victim, or maybe a savior. So that's the situation I was in. I was safe, but my entire team was in mortal danger, all because of an unexplained, terrifying warning from a neighbor I barely knew. I had 1 hour left until his chilling deadline of noon. I was an accidental survivor of an attack, and the key to the entire mystery was literally 30 feet across the hall, behind a locked door. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did, and what Mark eventually revealed to me, I want you to pause and comment below. Knowing what I knew, that my friends were in danger and my neighbor held the key, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have gone across the hall, risked confrontation, and forced a confession? Or would you have waited for the police to handle it, focusing only on giving them information about the siege? Let me know your choice. I didn't wait. Guilt, terror, and a burning need for answers propelled me. It was 11:25 a.m. I was done waiting for noon. I had to know why my life was spared. I grabbed my keys and ran across the hall. I didn't bother to knock. I hammered on Mark's door, screaming his name until my voice was raw. "Mark, Mark, you have to answer. The police are there. It was the merger. They're holding everyone hostage. I need to know how you knew." After what felt like an eternity, the door cracked open. Mark stood there, looking even worse than he had at 5 a.m. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching a tissue box, his hands shaking violently. He pulled me inside, slamming the door shut. His apartment was dark, blinds drawn, and smelled faintly of burning electronics. The man was clearly in the throes of a massive panic attack. "You came back safe," he whispered, a huge rush of air leaving his lungs. I was so scared, I thought I was too late. I grabbed his shoulders. "Mark, how did you know? You have to tell me." He looked away, his eyes darting to a shelf where a small, framed photo sat. It was a picture of him, smiling brightly, standing next to a beautiful woman. "That's Sarah," he choked out, pointing a trembling finger at the photo. "She used to work at Sterling and Associates. She was an analyst on the 27th floor. She didn't make it 3 years ago. A different incident, a different attack." He paused, taking a ragged breath. "I was on a work trip. She told me she was scared, that something felt wrong in the building. I told her to be rational, to go in. I never saw her again." The story pouring out of him was a torrent of grief and paranoia. After Sarah's death, Mark had completely fallen apart. He became obsessed with the security of the building, convinced that the incident that killed Sarah was not a random occurrence, but a sign of a deeper, recurring problem. He started monitoring the building's security system not professionally, but through a complex network of public cameras, and chillingly, by exploiting a tiny security flaw he found in building's central server access code he got from Sarah's old files. He had turned his grief into an amateur, obsessive surveillance operation. "I saw them," he finally confessed, tears streaming down his face. I saw the three men around 4:30 a.m. They drove into the private parking garage, the one only used by the executives. Their car wasn't on the approved list. They were wearing old company-issued contractor badges, but they looked too tense, too wrong. I knew that feeling. I've been watching for it for 3 years. I saw the same look on Sarah's face the day she died. I checked the building schematics. They were heading for the elevators that go straight to the 27th floor, the merger audit office. I knew what was happening. I couldn't save Sarah, but I recognized your car, Samantha. I knew you were the first one in the office. I couldn't let it happen again. The relief, the sheer shock, and the overwhelming gratitude that flooded me were paralyzing. He wasn't a criminal. He was a broken, vigilant hero. He was a man consumed by the failure to save his own loved one, who redeemed himself by saving a complete stranger. It was a story too bizarre for fiction. It was 11:45 a.m. The police were still at the tower. I told Mark to stay put and that I needed to call Detective Ramirez back. I got the detective back on the line. I didn't tell him everything, not about the illegal surveillance, but I relayed the critical information I needed to. Detective, listen to me. This wasn't a random target. This was about the Henderson audit. The former client, Mr. Elias, is known for his rage. He has a history of violence, and he always carries a distinctive, oversized key fob. If you can ID that on any of the suspects, you'll have your leader. It was a tiny, seemingly insignificant detail I had learned during my own work on the case, but Mark's warning had given it deadly significance. I hung up the phone and looked at the clock. 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes to noon. At 12:01 p.m., the TV news banner changed. Hostage situation resolved. All hostages accounted for, 2 suspects in custody. The third suspect, Mr. Elias, had been apprehended moments later. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It was Sarah. I'm okay, Sam. We're all okay. David has a gash, but he's fine. We heard you were the one who helped the police. You saved us. The tears came again, but this time they were tears of profound relief. Mark had not only been right, his bizarre, terrifying warning had worked. The aftermath was complicated. The police eventually brought me in for a full statement. I, of course, never mentioned Mark's surveillance. I simply explained that I had been doing some late-night research on the merger and that a gut feeling, coupled with a deep dive into the former client's known habits like the key fob, led me to call the detective with my concerns after I missed my morning meeting. Mark's secret remained safe with me. I protected the man who had protected me. My career at Sterling and Associates, ironically, wasn't just saved, it was skyrocketed. I was hailed as a hero, a quick, thinking analyst who provided the key piece of information that helped resolve the crisis without loss of life. I received a massive bonus, an immediate promotion, and a letter of commendation from the city police department. It was all a lie, of course, a carefully constructed facade to protect my terrified neighbor. The true hero was across the hall. Mark and I developed a strange, silent understanding. We never spoke about the incident again, not directly. But every Tuesday morning, I make 2 cups of coffee, and I gently knock on his door. He opens it, takes the cup, and simply nods, a ghost of a smile on his face, the terror finally replaced by a quiet, deep sense of peace. He's retired his surveillance operation. He finally feels like he can rest. He was able to save someone. I owe him everything, not just my job, not just my career, but my life. This experience fundamentally changed the way I see the world. It taught me that logic is sometimes the most dangerous path, that sometimes the most irrational warning is the only thing that stands between you and disaster, and that the quiet person living next door might just be the most important person you will ever meet. This entire unbelievable ordeal all stemmed from one frantic, inexplicable 5 a.m. knock. It was the most terrifying moment of my life, but it led to the most important realization. Always trust the terrified person telling you to stay home. I'm still processing the sheer luck of it all. I'll forever be grateful to the broken man who saved my life. I hope my story serves as a reminder that not all heroes wear capes. Some are just your quiet neighbors, haunted by a past failure, who save you from a future one. Like this video if you were on my side, and think I did the right thing by protecting Mark's secret. Subscribe for more stories like this, where reality is stranger than fiction. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess, on Mark's extreme actions, and on the terrifying moment the police called me, in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.